now go over to my conversation with Proinsias O'Rahilly. I assumed that he was the O'Rahilly, the president of the O'Rahilly, but apparently it's quite complicated how that particular title is handed down through the family.
So you are the O'Rahilly, are you?
No, I'm not the O'Rahilly.
No,
my grandfather was the O'Rahilly.
Yeah, but doesn't it come down?
I'm a grandson. The eldest son, that's my card.
Okay.
The eldest son of the eldest son retains the title.
Oh, you're not the eldest son.
The man, no, thank God, he's in his 80s now. So that's the way it works, you know.
So the O'Rahilly is the head of the clan of O'Rahilly.
It was Michael Joseph O'Rahilly. Was born in Ballylongford in 1875 to a wealthy man who had a very wealthy business, a very thriving business, provision business down in Ballylongford. His father was Richard. Richard one day went in to cycle into Listowel to set up a farmers co-op. That was his idea. He was the first man to think of this, and the result of that today is Kerryco.
Nice.
He died because he got pneumonia on the bicycle coming back, and he died of pneumonia. When he died, my grandfather was the only son in the family, and the two sisters had no interest in the business. So my grandfather ran the business for a while, but he decided he would sell it up. So he sold it up and did very well from the sale, and he fell in love with a girl that he had met in Tarbert at a private party. When he saw her, he wanted her to be his wife. So he was very involved in various other interests, and a lot of people don't know his interests, but he had a lot of interests. In fact, one of them was the Irish language, and he actually was a magistrate at one stage. So he decided he'd go
in the colonial days.
Yes, the early 1900s. He decided to go to Dublin to study his medicine, but unfortunately he contracted tuberculosis, TB. So that was the end of that. And then he heard that the sweetheart that he was after, there was some other man in the picture. So the story goes that he used to love backing the odd horse and this and that, and he got a huge amount of money from backing some horse, and he said, I'm off to Amsterdam. He went to Amsterdam and he bought a solitaire diamond, stone,
yes.
And I think he brought that to New York, got it mounted in Tiffany's, and proposed to her, and she accepted. And her father's business was in the woolen mills in Philadelphia. He bought a house in Philadelphia. It was called Slieve Lucre. And then when the business failed, he did his best to help. He decided to move back home. My father was born out there, Neil, who became a doctor and osteopath himself. They came back and they settled anyway in Herbert Park, having moved around a bit. They were in Bray, they were in the Queen's Hotel in Dalkey, they were around a bit in Easton Street. So from Herbert Park anyway, he got quite involved, first of all with Sinn Féin on the day, and he became the co-founder of the Irish Volunteers. Now if you go into Wynn's Hotel in Dublin on Middle Abbey Street, and every time I go there and get off the Lewis, when it was running, which was not at the moment,
forced on strike, yes.
Yes. So anyway, the very area inside there, the lounge is called the Scholars' Lounge. And the Scholars' Lounge is where the Volunteers is founded, with Pierce Bulmer Hobson. And today, if you walk in there, you will see a plaque on the wall to my grandfather, which I'm quite proud of. And Jimmy Deanahan was the Minister for Arts and Culture, who had a lot of pride in, as another Kerryman, in our history. So we had a big thing in 2013. So we put a plaque, 2014, we put a plaque for Cumann na Món then, yes, on the wall right next to my grandpa's, with my grandmother's name on it, with the other people that attended, like Thomas Margaret and that. So I'm very proud when I go into that hotel, and I often sit there having a wine, and I look over, at the two plaques, and I think side by side in life, side by side in death.
So your grandfather was actually, he died in action during the...
He was the only leader killed in action.
The others were all shot and
they were all executed.
Yes,
yeah.
So the O'Rahilly, basically, it's the head of a chieftain clan, isn't it? The O'Rahilly.
Yeah.
Well, where was the O'Rahilly clan based?
Well, Ballyrockford. That's where they're from.
Right.
Excuse me, but the thing about it was, back in those days, you'd have especially in Kerry, you'd have a son who would be the head of the clan. We'd say there'd be 4 or 5 girls in the clan, and he was the only boy. They call him Mac, which means Mac, which means son. As my grandfather. I'm sorry, as my uncle. But my grandfather adopted this name, D, as head of the clan.
Right.
But he had originally done this with the name UA, in Irish is Ua.
Yeah.
And to this day, that's on his gravestone in Glasnevin. He was the only leader, actually, in 1916 to be buried in Glasnevin. The rest were buried in... And he was buried twice in Glasnevin. There's a lot of things people don't know about that. But, excuse me, he was moved from one place to another, and it was his sister Anna that buried him, and in what they call now the Republican plot.
But getting back to connections with Kerry, do you remember when de Gaulle retired? And he came to Ireland and stayed in Kerry for a couple of weeks?
Well, I don't know about that, but I do know I'm going to Connemara and staying in recess.
I remember on television in Newbridge we watched it, and he was walking along the beach with the parish priest, but he said in an interview that he was descended from the kings of Kerry.
Well, I don't know anything about that now. I mean, I'm sticking to my family values. I can't remark on that.
No.
Dry throat here. But anyway, that was but I think regarding my grandfather, he didn't want to get involved in the rising because he felt it was a wrong move at the time. So when Owen MacNeill gave him the countermanding order to cancel it, he drove. He couldn't drive his own car. Something, I don't know what it was too much. He was so tired, so he got a taxi, and he taxied all around the country cancelling the rising, only to come back to his house to fall asleep, absolutely exhausted, on the Easter Sunday, to only be knocked up by Garrett Fitzgerald's father, Desmond, who also had a house in Bentry next to my grandfather. Built a house in Bentry, and which we still use. The family used it a week a year, so we all put in a few bob into the kitty to keep it. It's an amazing house. But then they did that, and my grandfather anyhow decided when Desmond came in to say it started. So he made this famous statement when he got into his car. He put all the rifles from his shed out the back of the garden in Fort Éire Park, opposite the American Embassy, and he drove his Dion Bouton into Liberty Hall with his sister Anna, who helped him load the guns. And there were Mausers, which were brought in. He was the instigator of that. He was the whole brains behind a lot of things. But apart from the finance, he was the brains behind the cool gun running. Which a lot of people don't even know that. I mean, he named the streets in Irish, every street in Dublin in Irish. So when he got to Liberty Hall, there was a huge round of applause and hooray that he now joined them as such. And Countess Markovich said to him, "Oh, why are you here?" And he made a statement, "I wound the clock, so now because of that I've come to hear it strike. I might as well hear it strike."
Right.
So with that, Countess Markovich turned around to him and he says, "What do you think of our chances, Michael?" "Look," he said, "it'll be madness, but it will be glorious madness." And they both laughed. So then they went up to the GPO. Anna was sent home. She said, I'll need the car for ferrying arms. Took the side door of the GPO on Princess Street. Walked, he went in, the rest of them went in to get everyone out, Pierce and Connolly. And he ran upstairs, and there was a cot, the British, on the hop. He disarmed them, 6 of them, because their guns were against the wall and they were playing cards or something like that.
Probably.
So it was done very peacefully. And they took over the GPO, and the rest is really history.
Yes. And he was shot in Moore Street, you say?
He was killed in a yes, he was leading. No, he was leading when the GPO roof was falling in. He was the last command. Connolly gave him the last command. He got up on the counters. He was the treasurer, by the way, of the stamps, postal orders in the GPO. He was the only sole key holder. And after 1916, when they found the key, everything down to the last penny was intact. And I'm talking about thousands.
Yeah.
When they were going around looting every other building. But the men's morale got very low. He got on the counter and he got them all to sing The Men of 98. So, 78. So then he went out the side door and he again said to his friend Desmond, we'll never meet again in this life, but it's better than catching a cold running for a tram.
Right.
And he went out, he got 12 volunteers at the time, because a few others followed him apparently. And he went out, that was 13, it always crops up in my life. He went down, he didn't go the evacuation route as the rest of the garrison went, he went down to the Moore Street thing. But what they didn't understand was when he had given the order to charge, he had a sword in one hand, a Luger in the other, not a Luger, sorry, a Mauser, because he had a Luger and a Mauser. He said charge, went down the street, but what they didn't know was there was a Maxim machine gun at the bottom of the corner, and they made it 180 yards, but it opened up and he got hit, and he just hit the ground face first. And eyewitnesses have said that the clash from the sword, you could hear it echoing around the buildings. He grimaced and he turned on his side and he blessed himself. And for some extraordinary reason, he was able to get up again, blue in the face, and continue again with his men. And they got down very close to where Legal is now, and hid in a doorway there, which was a pub at the time. And he looked around to see where his men were. He was bleeding heavily. He had a note from his son Aegon in his breast pocket, and the first two bullets went through that note, and he looked around, and when he went out to the middle of the street, the machine gun opened up and cut him literally in half from his shoulder down to his waist. He dragged himself then into into Sacco Lane, which is now the O'Rahilly Parade, and he got to a doorway, and he was bleeding very, very heavily, and he managed to take out the note from his pocket that Aegon had sent in earlier, and on the back of it he wrote the famous note back home, which we have now on the plaque. Now at this stage his head was on the footpath and his feet were against the door, but he cried out for water, and there was dead men around him. There was nobody would come to his aid, and Lowe ordered a sentry guard to go at the corner. Now an ambulance man came up a few times, Albert Finney, to say, could I look after that man? No, soldier, that's it. So he came back the second time, no. So it's well known that my grandfather bled to death alone at that doorway, but prior to him dying he bent forwards, and with his blood he wrote on the doorway, "The O'Rahilly died here, R.I.P." People were passing by, they weren't allowed in. Nurse Elizabeth Farrell saw him, and he was still alive 24 hours later, near enough. And he died alone.
The Brits wouldn't let him.
No, he wouldn't, but they robbed his watch, which was a terrible thing, and his wedding ring, would never be found again. And the O'Rahilly was so kind to the British soldiers in his command, his GPO. They have actually written back to extend the way and the kindness that the O'Rahilly looked after them, getting them food, and you must eat, and you must have water, you must blah blah blah. And this was at a time when the roof was bombarded with incendiary devices. So it was a very tragic. He knew the game was up basically, but he went ahead with it anyway. And as a result, anyway, after the rest of the garrison went out of the GPO, he was the first evacuation. They went into the streets, or into the number 10 Moore Street terrace. So myself and Jim Connolly, who is a great grandson of James Connolly, myself and Jim and a few others are trying for the last 16 years, well, especially in the last 4, to save that terrace. And we set up a group called 1916 Centenary Initiative Group. I'll give you a card about that now in a minute, and you can Google it up and you'll see what we're talking about. So now it's 100 years later. I'm in court. I've taken the Minister for Arts and Culture through another person, third party, to court, and we're sitting there daily for the last 3 weeks at enormous expense, personally, and we're fighting this. So the judge, and the funny thing about it is, as I said to you previously, that Owen McNeill's grandson is working for the state against us. Yeah. And this is the man whose grandfather gave the countermanding order. So I mean, you couldn't write it. But this minister, Humphreys, who's a Presbyterian, hasn't a word of Irish, didn't know what the Oscar was, asked me about Tinahely, didn't know who he was, has given the word that these certain buildings are going to be demolished. We've been 16 years, we have been fighting for the entire terrace to be saved. So that's that. So we're waiting for the outcome, because the National Museum and, which makes it really extraordinary, the British Imperial War Museum have already stated that the battlefield area, now when I'm talking about the battlefield area, I'm not just talking about the terrace, I'm talking about the evacuation route and Moor Lane and the backyards with cellars underneath them where these people occupied. So remember, there was 350 people in the garrison. That now, they say that it's the most important urban battlefield in Europe.
Right.
And this government, they're totally lacking. They don't understand what they're talking about. No. They have this person, Humphreys, in charge, and she's an absolute, to us, a disgrace. The government are a disgrace. And in the year of the centenary, we're in bloody court. And as far as I'm concerned, the sooner that minister is shafted, the better. Yeah. It's an insult to the relatives, and we are very angry. So
tell me about the note, about how the note came into your possession.
The note didn't come into my possession.
Well, no, it came into the family possession.
The note was written by him, and it was found by a soldier who, obviously the person probably who robbed his watch and thing. Yeah. And it was brought into Maxwell's office, or Lowe's, in Dublin Castle. And it was sitting on the desk there, probably under an inkwell or something like that. And there was a lady cleaner who, word got around Dublin how bad the O'Reilly was treated.
Yes.
And she, as a sympathiser, lifted the note, put it in her between her breasts, and got her out and delivered it to Anna out in Herbert Park.
Your grandmother?
No, his sister.
Oh, his sister,
His sister was there because my grandmother was doing Coming to Mom business, because she was very involved in Coming to Mom.
Right.
And Anna then, of course, passed it on to my grandmother. But the thing about it is, apart from the very moving words that he used on the note when dying, because he knew that was it, it leaves a fantastic story for our new generation. Now, I've got a little guy that comes up. He's 8 years of age, from Offaly, and he dresses up. His idol was my grandfather. He dresses up as my grandfather, and he's coming up on Easter Sunday, and I'm actually going to get him on air outside the TPO. And he's already done a little documentary, but he's just absolutely enthralled. But you see, the problem with this government is, the Fine Gael, the kind of blue shirt government,
that's right.
They have no interest in our past. No. They're, as far as I can say, they're cronies, they're capitalists, they're not interested at all. And it's tragic to see it, especially in the centenary year. I won't be around to fight this battle anymore because I'm in ill health, but I've given it my best shot, as Jim Connolly have. I mean, we've better things to be doing with our lives than sitting in court, going on about what... And by the way, this property down Moore Street belongs to the people of Ireland. It doesn't belong to any one government.
And what's Dublin Corporation's position on this?
Corporation has nothing got to do with it. It's Dublin City Council.
Dublin City Council.
Yeah,
right.
But you must understand that the bankrupt developer down there bought the property down there, and that was handed to Nama. And in the meantime, he's swimming up in his pool in the back of his house in Foxrock and being paid $200,000 a year as we're talking. Or am I speaking to you? And not a care in the world. So his debts now have been passed on and bought. It was called by Nama, Project Jewel. That has been bought now by another third party called Hammerson's, an English company. So they've bought, not the property, but the debt.
Yes,
the debt. That's very important, not the property, the debt. So they've just found out that they were kind of conned, because there's an actual monument down there in a terrace. So basically what we have asked both Enda Kenny and this government and Minister Noonan to purchase, the Project Jewel, the NAMA portfolio, it just didn't include Moore Street and the battlefield area, the evacuation route. It actually covered Dundrum Shopping Centre, Sword Shopping Centre. And what really, I find the arrogance of it is, they could have quite as easily dropped the Moore Street battlefield area out of that sale and kept it for future generations.
Yes.
Now, they spent 12 million on the GPO, interpretive centre behind the GPO. They haven't the gumption to know that this battlefield, I mean, where in the world would you get a battlefield off the main thoroughfare?
No.
That people could actually walk out and take the footsteps. And by the way, that's another point I want to make. There are some cobblestones still existing, and the buildings that were there in 1916. The reason we're calling it a battlefield, and I want to get this point across, the battlefield area around Moore Street, why we call it a battlefield, is because it was the last stand of the birth of a government, the birth of the nation.
Yeah.
It was where 5 leaders who signed the proclamation, that was their last stand. We get birth of the nation there. There wouldn't be a Dáil, there wouldn't be a government, we wouldn't have our country. They made the ultimate sacrifice. This crowd of cronies up there, and arrogant people, I don't know why. I mean, Enda Kenny going out and giving a bow to Obama with Shamrock. I've got a friend of mine who's a cousin of Obama's, and I'm trying to get Obama to say to him, to question, what about Moore Street in your battlefield area on Patrick's Day? And I can guarantee Enda Kenny would be on the next flight home very fast. But we have asked them to do an independent survey of the buildings. They haven't done that. Now that they've bought the buildings, they've ripped out all the staircases, all the light fittings, thrown them back down in a skip. So now what you have is a shell of the buildings. And this is under Miss Humphrey's orders. So what we've been trying to protect for 16 years now is just a gutted building for them. So they're trying to refit that one building so they can lay a wreath on it on Easter, so they look well. Okay? So, but the diaspora now through Facebook and through other media, they know that they've just literally insulted our golden generation. They have absolutely no historical interest in historical events that led to the foundation of this state, and they're taking now adopting the developer's plan. So that's it, basically.